Embattled Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis is on notice. A Georgia Court of Appeals says it will review a lower court decision not to disqualify Willis. The review could cause the trial to be delayed for months. President Biden is on the campaign trail announcing new plans for a new multi-billion-dollar Microsoft AI data center in Wisconsin. We'll tell you how many jobs he says it will create. How much is the border crisis costing the U.S.? Congress is trying to find out today what lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are saying. Reports of anti-Semitic incidents all across America's public schools. The House Committee on Education and the Workforce held a hearing today to discuss combating hateful speech and actions against Jewish students and faculty. The shooting death of an emotionally disturbed 22-year-old reignites debate about the unarmed model of crisis response. NTD speaks with a criminologist who says sending civilians instead of armed law enforcement poses risks to both individuals and the police. Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers, filling in for Stephanie Cox. A Georgia State Appeals Court will hear former President Trump's appeal of the Fani Willis disqualification ruling. The court on Wednesday said Trump can file an appeal within the next 10 days. A lower court decided not to disqualify Willis. Judge Scott McAfee said there was an appearance of impropriety, but that defense attorneys had not proven there was a conflict. The embattled district attorney is accused of creating a conflict of interest over her personal relationship with her former special prosecutor, Nathan Wade. Wade resigned as a result of the judge's order, but Willis and her office were permitted to continue the case against Trump and several others. Trump's attorney, Steve Sadow, applauded the appeals court decision, saying the former president looks forward to arguing before the appeals court. Sadow said the case should ultimately be dismissed. President Biden hits the campaign trail today, this time in the battleground state of Wisconsin. Today's visit is his fourth to the state. Biden announced a new venture by Microsoft that should bring thousands of construction and tech jobs to Wisconsin.
Since I took office, we've added nearly 4,000 jobs in Racine. As I said earlier, we've added 178,000 in the state of Wisconsin. The unemployment rate has hit a record low in Racine. Racine has seen some of the strongest new business growth in all of Wisconsin, and it's only just beginning.
Microsoft's AI center will be built on the site of the failed $10 billion investment from Taiwanese electronics manufacturer Foxconn. That deal was supported by former President Trump. As part of Microsoft's investment, the tech giant is joining with Gateway Technical College to develop a data center academy. The partnership plans to train 1,000 people to serve in data center and STEM roles by 2030. Biden also took time to speak to black voters. In 2020, Biden carried the state by just 21,000 votes with heavy support from Wisconsin suburbs. He didn't do as well with black voters across the state. The Biden administration is poised to open up a new front in its effort to safeguard U.S. AI from China and Russia by placing guardrails around the most advanced AI models, the core software of artificial intelligence systems like ChatGPT. The Commerce Department is considering a new regulatory push to restrict the export of proprietary or closed-source AI models. The software and data these models are trained on are kept under wraps, according to a published report. Any action would complement a series of measures put in place over the last 2 years to block the export of sophisticated AI chips to China. This is an effort to slow Beijing's development of the cutting-edge technology for military purposes. Even so, it will be hard for regulators to keep pace with the industry's fast-moving developments. And TikTok and its parent company are suing the U.S. government in federal court. A law is forcing the Chinese owners to sell the popular video app or face a ban on app stores in the U.S. Parent company ByteDance is arguing that the law blocks their First Amendment free speech protections. The bill was passed in a bipartisan effort by Washington lawmakers and signed into law by President Biden last month.
For more on this, we go now to NTD News contributor Mike Leon. He's the Policy and Strategy Director of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and host of the news commentary podcast called Can We Please Talk? So Mike, based on this situation, do you think the case will delay the upcoming ultimatum to sell the app by January?
Hey, Chris, good to see you first and foremost. I don't think it'll delay it. Like it all depends on when the courts take up this case, and at the root cause of all of this. And I've had different lawmakers on that have had varying opinions about or not the constitutionality behind this, is feasible. I remember speaking with Representative Jasmine Crockett, who's a public defender and somebody who voted present on the TikTok bill itself, because I feel that constitutionality wise, it would fly. And now we're seeing this challenge, and TikTok is arguing kind of what she argued, which is the free speech part of this, that the U.S. is the Department of Justice, is setting a dangerous precedent right now by limiting an app and not actually regulating other apps that are comparable to TikTok in the marketplace. I don't foresee it holding anything up right now, but I think what will be interesting is in the lawsuit, when we get into the case, the Department of Justice is really going to bring forth this national security threat that it poses. And the two different administrations, the Trump and Biden administration, that have tried to ban this app's use, and we've seen, our employees at the government are not allowed to use TikTok. So we'll see all of this introduced into the lawsuit, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, now, Mike, this suit says that hypothetical national security concerns aren't enough to ban the app. What does the U.S. have to do to show it is a serious risk? And does the U.S. have enough evidence?
Well, that's the key question, right, Chris? Because as of right now, I think the U.S., all they have is that ByteDance is owned by a Chinese-based company, right? At the core of this, that's what they truly have. The data collection and privacy concerns, and why they want to divest, from that company to a U.S.-based company is what the Department of Justice is going to try to argue. And everything that I just mentioned before about government employees here in the U.S. are not allowed to use it, the front-facing app for customers in the U.S. versus what customers see in China are two different user experiences. This is kind of where I've worked in product and technology for the last 15 years, and the government really hasn't been integral in regulating companies like this. So I don't know, TikTok's already won twice in court during the Trump administration years with respect to free speech and a statewide ban in Montana. So there is precedent on TikTok's side that they have won cases like this that have been brought forth against them. And I think right now, the only compelling thing is that, like you mentioned before, overwhelming bipartisan support to get them to divest, and within a timely fashion. It doesn't necessarily mean that the app will be banned in the U.S. They just need to divest from the company that is owned by a foreign government,
And there are some articles out there that say other big tech companies are doing the same thing that TikTok is. You sort of touched on this briefly for a moment, but I want to go a little deeper. Does this law set a precedent for other tech companies, even ones that aren't under Chinese authority, this law that was recently passed?
Well, Chris, and I've had two different lawmakers tell me on both sides of this argument, because privacy concerns, data collection concerns, there are far bigger companies with more security and data that have credit card information, customer information like that have privacy concerns. And so forget about social media for a second, because yes, there's a currency exchange and obviously you're gathering user information from that. But there are other companies that have been data breaches. I've had data breaches in the past, 12, 18 months. Equifax has had a large data breach. So I think right now, I don't know if it sets a bad precedent depending upon where this ruling goes, because I think in one avenue, and you'll find lawmakers that have said TikTok is right about this. This is free speech. Now, it is a privately owned platform, so there's a terms of service and privacy policy.
Yeah.
But the big issue has been security threat. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where this all shakes out.
All right, Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Chris.
Another round of arrests. Police say they cleared a pro-Palestinian encampment today off the grounds of George Washington University in Washington, D.C. 33 people were reportedly arrested for unlawful entry and assault on a police officer.
The encampment was in place since April 25th. Tensions grew after police removed a large Palestinian flag protesters had raised over a university building. The school offered students an alternative protest site, which students ignored. Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser and Metro Police Chief were scheduled to testify in front of Congress on their response to the encampment. The hearing was canceled after the arrests.
You think about the arrest that took place overnight, do you think it's long overdue, or do you think it should have never happened?
I don't think it necessarily should have never happened. I'd say the level of violence definitely wasn't at a point where like arrests were necessary. Absolutely not.
I'm for it. Arrest them. They're vandalizing the property. They're not changing anything, and I think that if they have something to contribute, they should go get a job and then donate the money to their cause that they're fighting for.
Prior to this happening, it was very peaceful. It was totally fine within their First Amendment right. But then if it escalated, then I agree that there should be some sort of de-escalation going on.
Cops basically invaded the encampment in the middle of the night while everybody was sleeping. I feel as though that's kind of universally seen as a very cowardly move.
I'm sad that it happened. People shouldn't get hurt, but I see both sides.
By and large, I was very impressed with the student body. I thought the arguments that they brought forth were relevant and serious.
Next, a hearing on anti-Semitism in America's K-12 public schools. The House Committee on Education and the Workforce today discussed combating hateful speech and actions against Jewish students and faculty. The hearing included school officials from New York, California, and Maryland. NTD's Fiona G. has more.
The Holocaust ended in 1945. The hate behind it has not. Anti-Semitism is repugnant in all its forms, but the topic of today's hearing is particularly troubling. It's hard to grasp how anti-Semitism has become such a dominant force in our K-12 schools. Some kids as young as second grade are spewing Nazi propaganda, which begs the question, who has positioned these young minds to attack the Jewish people? The very need for this hearing is a travesty. The aftermath of October 7th has revealed some of the ugliest, most deprived ideas once marginalized from polite society, and our education system has failed to stop it. It's not just anti-Israel, it's anti-American, it's anti-democracy.
House Republicans questioned school administrators' lack of disciplinary action in addressing discriminatory rhetoric. Concerns were also raised about hateful videos that propagated anti-Semitism on popular social media platforms such as TikTok. Discussions revolved around incidents of anti-Semitism in K-12 schools, including a riot against a Jewish high school teacher in Queens, New York.
Is the former principal at Hillcrest still drawing a salary from New York City Public Schools today?
Yes, he is.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I said, yes, he is.
You are still paying.
He is no longer the principal of the school.
How can Jewish students feel safe at New York City Public Schools when you can't even manage to terminate the principal of Open Season on Jews High School, or even endorse suspension of student harassment? How can Jewish students go to school knowing that he is still on your payroll, sir?
I know whose payroll it is, sir. And it's not Open Season on Jews School. It's called Hillcrest High School. That's the name of the school. And at that school, we considered his leadership not strong enough to be the leader in that school.
Wow, but he can still strong enough to participate in your school district? He's still strong enough to be on your payroll?
As the leader of that school.
Proposed strategies at the hearing to combat anti-Semitism include modifying curricula to include a more comprehensive view of Jewish history and increased media literacy training to teach students to think critically about the content they consume on social media. Fiona G., NTD News.
The accused killer of Georgia nursing school student Laken Riley is facing additional charges. The Venezuelan migrant has been indicted on charges for allegedly peeping on a University of Georgia staff member the same day as the murder. NTD's Dave Martin has the story.
Court documents show Jose Ibarra, who's illegally living in the U.S., was hit with 10 new charges on Tuesday. They include malice, murder, and kidnapping with bodily injury in the death of Riley. A grand jury also indicted Ibarra on tampering with evidence and being a peeping Tom. He was spotted looking through a window at an on-campus apartment and spying upon a university staff member. The accused killer entered the U.S. illegally in El Paso, Texas in 2022 with his wife and her son seeking asylum. He was later released for further processing, according to ICE. Ibarra was also charged with a felony in New York City for failing to use a helmet and proper restraints while riding a scooter with his 5-year-old stepson.
The House Budget Committee today investigating the cost of the border crisis caused by illegal immigration. Chairman Jody Arrington says the cost lies anywhere between $150 and $400 billion.
The lion's share of that cost is borne by state and local governments. And friends, state and local governments can't borrow or print money like the federal government. And so they're having to balance their budgets by either absorbing this cost through raising taxes, or they're having to cut services to their citizens.
He added that the cost comes to about $9,000 per illegal immigrant. Arrington says that's more than the U.S. spends per Medicaid beneficiary. It's also more than veterans receive in ways of retirement benefits. Democrats, meanwhile, criticized the fact that Republicans are holding today's hearing.
Step one, Republicans demanded a border deal. Step two, they negotiated a border deal. Step three, when Trump ordered them to, they killed that border deal. And finally, step four, here we are holding a hearing about how bad the border is.
He was talking about a border deal which came out of the Senate. The House isn't picking it up because Republicans say it would only allocate money to the border without fixing underlying issues. And before that deal, the House had already passed a border bill titled H.R. 2, but the Senate isn't picking that one up. And we'll have more on this on NTD Evening News with Tiffany Meyer at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. Next, stronger protections against online child sex abuse. President Biden signed a bill into law yesterday. Democratic Senator John Ossoff and Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn had co-sponsored the legislation. The REPORT Act requires email and cloud service providers to report suspected abuse to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It increases penalties from $150,000 up to $1 million for service providers that don't follow through. The bill also requires tech companies to preserve documentation of the alleged abuse for a year instead of just 3 months. We now turn to updates on the Israel-Hamas war. The U.S. has reportedly paused an arms shipment to Israel amid concerns over the Rafah operation. A Biden administration official told Reuters that the U.S. held up a shipment of over 3,000 bombs to Israel last week. This is reportedly over concerns that they may be used in the Rafah operation, which the U.S. opposes. The official said the 2,000-pound bombs could have an impact in dense urban settings. The Israeli military appeared to respond, saying, quote, "When there are disputes, and there are, they are being resolved behind closed doors in a matter-of-fact way." This comes as CIA Director Bill Burns met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss ceasefire and hostage negotiations. Inside Gaza, the UN says roughly 50,000 people have evacuated from Rafah, and the Karim Shalom border crossing between southern Gaza and Israel has reopened to allow humanitarian aid. When we come back, trees snapped like twigs, mangled mobile homes, and wrecked vehicles. Midwest twisters continue to wreak havoc. And the shooting death of an emotionally disturbed 22-year-old reignites debate about the unarmed model of crisis response. NTD speaks with a criminologist who says sending civilians instead of armed law enforcement poses risks to both individuals and the police. We have more after the break.
I had a pretty normal mom life. Everything was pretty good, and it was a very happy life.
And we just had a new baby. And then all of a sudden, within a day or two, she's on life support and fighting for her life.
And I knew something was pretty wrong. A little less than a week after I came home, I couldn't breathe. That's when we decided to go to the hospital. I was given the diagnosis that I had peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically a pregnancy-induced heart failure. They told me my only chance was a heart transplant.
And the American Heart Association helped make that possible. Their research helped save me.
This could not happen without monthly donations from friends like you. Your sustained support helps fund life-saving research that leads to medical breakthroughs, like those that gave Jen a second chance at life. Heart disease is the #1 killer in America, and we urgently need your help to save lives. Go to helpheart.org or call now to become a monthly donor today. Your donation of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, will make a difference through prevention, early detection, treatments, and cures that help save lives.
I am very thankful for the American Heart Association. I'm grateful for just every day that I get with my children.
Please go to helpheart.org or call now with your donation of just $19 a month. Join our community of monthly donors, and you'll get this limited edition t-shirt you could wear to show you're helping save lives.
One simple act today can save your life or the life of a loved one.
So please, call or go to helpheart.org now to help save lives.
Freedom is not free, and neither is the truth. In order to bring you the facts, our reporters are out there on the front lines getting the true story. Some of them served 10 years of prison in China. We've been censored on social media. Our Hong Kong printing offices were set on fire, and we've been repeatedly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party. But no matter what, we believe that you deserve the truth, and so we'll continue to bring the truth to light. Head on over to getepic.com and try honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
If you love them enough to suck the snot out of their nose at 4 a.m., then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
A barrage of storms swept through the Midwest yesterday, unleashing heavy rain, strong gusts of wind, and tornadoes. Here are the latest updates on the severe weather in the region. Storms continue to batter the Midwest. In southern Indiana, the National Weather Service confirmed a tornado touchdown earlier today. Survey teams are determining if tornadoes struck locations in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia as well. According to PowerOutage.us, around 30,000 homes and businesses in Michigan are still without power as of this afternoon. The Midwest and the South are expected to get the brunt of the bad weather through the rest of the week. Major cities in its path include Indianapolis, Memphis, Nashville, St. Louis, and Cincinnati, where in total more than 21 million people live. And the deadline for people to file their 2020 tax returns and who are expecting a refund is fast approaching, and some FTX investors will be able to get their money back. NTD's Don Ma has those stories in today's Business Matters.
FTX has recovered enough assets to pay most of its creditors back in full, the failed crypto exchange said late yesterday. And this is coming as it unveiled a proposed reorganization plan. And here's a statement. The plan contemplates payment in full of all non-governmental creditors based on the value of their claims as determined by the relevant bankruptcy court, FTX said. So the plan, which needs to be approved, by the way, by the U.S. court, would resolve disputes with governmental and private stakeholders without costly and protracted litigation. So FTX said yesterday that it had recovered assets associated with the exchange at the time of its collapse, with an estimated value of between $14.5 billion and $16.3 billion. In other news, chipmaker Intel said today that the U.S. Department of Commerce was revoking certain export licenses for its consumer-related items to a customer in China. And this would be a move that could impact its second quarter revenue. Intel did not disclose the name of the Chinese customer in its filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. On Tuesday, the U.S. had revoked licenses that allowed companies, including Intel and Qualcomm, to ship chips used for laptops and handsets to sanctioned Chinese telecoms equipment maker Huawei. Besides that, the Internal Revenue Service says the deadline to claim more than $1 billion in tax refunds from 2020 is about to expire. May 17th is the deadline for people who failed to file their 2020 tax return to become eligible for a refund. The IRS says there is no penalty for failure to file if a refund is due. However, a return claiming a refund must be filed within 3 years of its due date for a refund to be allowed. Traditionally, the filing deadline to claim old refunds are around April 15th. But in 2020, the filing deadline was extended to May 17th due to COVID-19. A state-by-state income tax breakdown sheet for 2020 is posted on the IRS website. All right, thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers. Stay tuned to our Capitol Report at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific. See you tomorrow.